So network platforms. I always saw already packet networks are inherently virtualized. That's sort of the idea behind it. So agree or disagree, we've had VLANs for 15, 20 years. The idea of a packet network, it is virtualized. You're sharing a common resource. You're using common protocols. But it's fundamentally different now, and even big vendors like Cisco will admit this. I don't know how many of you know about their new Nexus switching platforms for the data center. Well, they have a virtual software Nexus that can run in software on a VMware box, and it's, yeah, as you noted, it's very pricey, and don't tell them I said this, but pretty much unnecessary in most environments. I mean, you can get around it, but for manageability, and especially when you talk about security, and this is real critical in a hosting type environment, you need to extend that security into the virtual platforms. So you have a lot of questions around, well, how do you separate that user traffic? How do you protect it from each other? How do you encrypt things? How do you ensure that data between virtual machines is protected? Because if you have one pipe, well, those guys can hop and talk to each other. Maybe. How do you prevent that? How do you control that? All the vendors have a variety of solutions for this. It's sort of a deluge of how do I pick which options are the best between the networking and the security. Again, I'd look at the holistic network architecture, wrapping together the storage, the networking, and the servers, and really nailing it together with the applications. Once you figure out what those application requirements are, which hopefully you know from your physical environments what they are, there are ways to map and re-architect to do those same things, and often better without the compromises in the virtual environment. Benefits, I think you can have your cake and eat it too. The old joke in IT is better, faster, cheaper, pick two. And that really isn't a decision you have to make entirely. There are some compromises, a decision you have to make entirely anymore. Certainly with the compute, and also now with the network and storage platforms, you can have most of all three. And I sort of like this picture. It just shows wrapping all these different things together in this, your virtualization platform. So it shows you, sure, your compute and your storage and your network are all part of this, and you're giving cloud services, and you're supporting your business users, but what are the aspects of this? The availability, the flexibility, the security. These are the input-output areas where you're going to get metrics that are really important. These are the things you're providing and maintaining it with the people, process, and tools. So if you look at it this way, it really is a business function. You have this black box that you're, as an IT organization, are maintaining all the innards of, but you're providing these services to these users as sort of a common thing. So when you're planning this, that's why I mentioned ITIL or ITSM, the infrastructure management frameworks. It's so important to wrap it together into one comprehensive platform that you architect, engineer, manage in an ongoing way, and provide that life cycle operations for. I've tried just dropping virtual environments on traditional server admins before. Not a good thing to do overnight. The management aspect, I can't stress enough how important it is. Can manage it and deliver a service the way the business wants it. The business wants to consume IT in a commoditized, measurable, visible, lower cost way. You can do it. You're going to have to invest in the right planning. You're going to have to invest in the right equipment. Do you have a deep bench? Do you have the IT skills and staff? You need to take a hard look at that. Where are you going to be able to train? Where are you going to be able to bring in temporary contracting resources to help out? That's not a place to skimp. But once you're ready, jump in the game. I think that what I've seen is that when there's a good plan, almost always the CFOs support it, and usually the rest of the executives support jumping into this when there's a good plan. And it's much more than a server consolidation project. It's a self-funding pilot that turns into an enterprise-wide initiative. You need the wherewithal and planning to put the right tools in place, the right process in place to ensure that those are meeting your SLAs, those are meeting your architecture, and they're, I guess, executing the directives that as IT and business are giving them, because you can scale up and down your resources, you can scale up and down your power consumption, you can make decisions between prioritizing applications, you can have automatic BCDR type, data center failovers and these sort of things. But contrary to what a lot of the vendors would have you believe on their sites and their presentations, that does not happen by itself. Change automation, also really important. Provisioning different platforms, making changes to those platforms, scaling them up and down, can all be automated. Again, that's where the real magic of virtualization becomes cloud. when you can provide all those types of services. For instance, you look at Amazon, you do everything through basically web interfaces. That's where they win. That's a pretty powerful wrapper on what is really just Zen virtualization platforms across tens of thousands of servers and some data centers that they have. That's all it is, but they have good tools and a nice interface that makes it so an end user, anybody can provision a server and pay for it. Transition time, there's a great deal of heavy lifting. Don't underestimate that. I was involved in a project where we transitioned 5,000 servers, and it took 2 or 3 times longer, depending on who you ask. It was actually about 2.5 times than they had expected, because they had planned for a certain rate. They hadn't planned for meeting customer SLAs, and what we helped them see is that, like any other move, any other change, it needs real tight management. How many of you have an ITIL type environment where you have fairly strict change control in your production environment? Pretty common now. A lot more hands than I saw 10 years ago, which is pretty much none. It's kind of scary. Everybody asks, well, what about going green? Well, you have an ability with these platforms to scale up and give me more functionality, but also manage that complexity. Well, obviously, we're going to try to reduce the cost. If it doesn't make sense short-term and long-term, hopefully it makes sense for one of the two, and your CFO or whichever executives are willing to support that. We know the complexity equals cost. That's where the tools and the process come in, helping you manage that complexity. Yes, it's something new. Yes, it's another layer of complexity, but it also offers the tools and automation to help you manage the lower layers of complexity. Like any other abstraction layer that we have in IT, managed well, it's great. Managed poorly, it's just another better, faster mess. I'll talk to you a little bit more about the examples here. The architecture, we sort of already talked about the compute resources, the storage resources, the network resources. Again, virtualizing each of those platforms in the same way you look at the server virtualization, that's the key to getting to cloud. Having each of these being a services-oriented platform where you can deliver them to end users or at least to different business units as a consumable resource. Common pitfalls, we see a lot of gaps in physical data center. Again, when I'm talking at 1:30, we'll talk a little bit more about what some of those are. Server platforms and workloads, analyzing that and understanding what those workloads are going to incur and really assessing that. There's a lot of great tools out there. I know Platespin's been out there for a long time, but really understanding what those workloads are going to look like in a virtualized environment can make a huge difference. And from a business perspective, really assessing what applications and services you have out there. If you don't have a good IT services catalog, this is a good time to look at least doing the initial steps around putting that together. The network topologies often don't fit. Again, considering how network and storage and also the management tools are all going to play in the virtual environment, it's different. Using the same tools and managing things the same way does not work, does not scale in this type of environment. As I'm sure a lot of you who have had some experience with virtualization have seen. Working with either experienced peers or partners, somebody who has some experience in doing this, I highly recommend. I love working with clients at all different parts of the project, but more times than not, we end up coming in partway through some sort of initiative, and it ends up being a different type of investment for the customer to fix things as opposed to doing it right the first time. Make sure you decide where your core competencies are, how much you want to outsource, if you want to do it all yourself, and decide if, again, the people, experience and expertise, if you have what you need to do it. You can have the virtual. It's not that hard. I've worked with a lot of people that I've helped or built their own virtual data centers, have put together this wrapper around what IT delivers and how they deliver applications and services and all the other goodies that IT provides. And really, there's a lot of talk of CIOs want IT to become an enabler for the business. And this is, more than anything I've seen in the last probably 10 to 15 years, a place where IT can become an enabler and not just a cost center for the business, where IT can offer an opportunity to improve applications, expand applications, make them easier to consume, make information easier to consume.